Moynihan, seen here in the Senate chamber during the attack, sent text messages to an anonymous source that said, quote, Hakeem Jeffries makes a speech in a few days in New York City. I can't allow this terrorist to live. Even if I'm hated, he must be eliminated. And I will kill him for the future. That anonymous person then tipped off the FBI. In a statement, the House Minority Leader criticized the blanket pardon that Trump gave to the January 6th defendants and said acts of violence will not stop us from showing up, standing up, and speaking up for the American people. First of all, this is scary. But second of all, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a natural consequence of pardoning people in a blanket fashion, just period, the end, regardless of what they were accused of doing.
Well, first, this is absolutely horrific and disgusting, and I'm so grateful that the FBI is as impressive as they are and was able to capture this. There's a man named Alton Mills who Barack Obama pardoned, who was a violent criminal and went on to murder somebody else. No one here knows his name because the reality is we can't be held responsible for what he did after that. This is disgusting, but I think to take a bigger look at what's going on, there is in fact one party that frequently releases violent criminals and puts them back on the street, and that is the Democratic Party, who's soft on crime. There was a man, DeCarlos Brown, who was arrested 14 times and went on to murder someone. So I think that is a bigger problem that Americans are facing today. And as for Hakeem Jeffries, absolutely disgusting that somebody wanted to target him, and I'm so grateful that the FBI discovered that plot.
So a few weeks ago, rhetoric was the issue and was the source of political violence on the left. Now here's a man who was pardoned by this president for a violent act, who then threatens a member of Congress, congressional leadership, and it's no big deal?
It is a big deal. Absolutely. It's a huge deal. The plot was foiled, and
right, but
thankfully everyone is safe.
I thought we just had this whole national conversation about rhetoric, which, by the way, I don't want to endorse that, but I'm just saying, especially on the right, that was the conversation, was that rhetoric was leading to violence. But now all of a sudden it's like, well, this is just what happens when you let people out of prison. It's just part of it.
It's not what happens, and that's why we're opposed to the soft on crime policies. Look, I'm not going to get into the pardons, whether that was a good thing or not, but it's happened.
I mean,
and
why
we can
not?
only
Why
move
can't we get into
forward
the pardons
and make sure that the people who are dangerous criminals
but
are
isn't that
off
the
the
issue?
streets.
Isn't the issue in part whether the pardons were good or not? You mentioned, we're talking about this guy, but there were several others. Another pardoned January 6th rioter was shot and killed in a confrontation with Indiana police. A January 6th rioter who was pardoned by Trump faced child sex charges. Ex-Proud Boy Enrique Tarrio arrested on assault charges outside of the Capitol after he was pardoned. Another rioter charged with burglary in Virginia. Another rioter arrested near Obama's house and convicted on gun charges. I mean, part of the issue here is that Trump pardoned a bunch of people who were convicted in many cases for violent crimes.
And the issue is, look, first, two things. One, I think we should also commend the anonymous person who tipped off authorities. And today I also saw a story about a foiled plot in the Atlanta airport where that man's family tipped off authorities. And so the fact that we are more vigilant as a society and that people are taking the proactive action of trying to stop this and taking these threats seriously, I think is something good that we need to recognize and applaud. As you were mentioning, there's been at least 8 reported pardoned January 6th convicted felons who have been rearrested for different things. Soliciting minors, firearm possession, different things. Look, here's the problem. That really pardons are a very serious thing which should be given all the weight and consideration and deliberation. Donald Trump wanted to make a big splash with pardoning them all with a blanket pardon on his first day, the first thing he signed, the first thing he did. If time had been taken to analyze each of them individually, maybe some of these things could have been avoided. But we are where we are. There's been at least 8. It's not the first. Hopefully this will be the last.
It is a risk when you blanket pardon a group.
It presents a warning. Clara, heed this call. The underground pirates plot to unleash chaos upon coral.
without really looking into the individuals. The same risk applies to Joe Biden, who pardoned thousands of drug criminals without looking into the individual files at the end of his administration. I don't know how many of them have reoffended. I'm sure if they haven't, some probably will because of the volume of them, and he'll be responsible for
Can I ask you a
that.
question about that? Are you suggesting that because Joe Biden did not personally look into each file, or because it did not go through a process? Because I'm not sure it didn't go through a process. But
Well,
you're
I'm
saying
saying the
it's because
president, it's pretty well reported
himself?
that the president himself did not go through each individual case.
Sure, but
and I'm just saying simply it's a
but
risk.
you understand,
When you blanket pardon, it's a
yeah,
risk.
I mean, I understand that, but you understand also that there is actually a DOJ process generally that most other pardons go through, and even that process was circumvented for these January 6 rioters, and I don't think that they were for those.
I think in the case of the drug cases, it was. I mean, they were looking for a class of people who they thought had been simply overcharged because of the drug issue. My point is simply this: whenever you do a large group of people and you're the president, the buck stops with you. You're ultimately responsible for what happens. I do agree it's hard to connect one thing to the other. You don't know what people are going to do. I personally have no tolerance whatsoever for people who are granted mercy in our unique way we do it and then go out and abuse that mercy. I have no tolerance for political violence. I have no tolerance for people threatening to kill anyone, from Hakeem Jeffries to Brett Kavanaugh to the other kinds of things we've seen. I have no tolerance for it, and I think they ought to throw the book at them. And I don't think any more mercy ought to be forthcoming people who have abused it in the past.
Well, I'd agree with that, but that means, in fact, that there's no moral or legal justification of blanket pardoning of insurrections January 6th. There's not in any way a persuasive argument one can make. And that's true for any president, be it Biden or be it Trump. And as you know, I'm not a fan of either one of those because I think they're tied to war crimes in Gaza, but that's just a rich footnote. But the important thing is more than just a risk, though, brother. It is no moral and legal justification. Drop the mic.
Well, the
Boom.
lack of
That's it.
remorse is one big part of it. I
Yeah.
mean, these people were not remorseful in any way, and that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, so we were just talking about pardons last week. I think pardons and commutations play an important role in our, and that the president should have that authority. I think that there needs to be systems and standards that apply for every president across the board, Democrat or Republican.
Absolutely.
But that aside, I think we're missing the context in which we're actually talking about when the story started about this individual and what they were actually trying to do on January 6th and how dangerous it was for our country, for people in the Capitol at that time. And so then I guess the question is, I like to see that usually when you get pardoned, there's a form of rehabilitation that happens. You have to show that you've served some time and that you've actually learned. We don't really know if that happened because it happened so fast under this administration. It was a campaign promise. It was actually like, I don't care if they served time and they did some rehabilitation. I'm going to do it so that my folks know I stand with these folks. And the final question I just have to ask is, Scott, you and I are aligned. There is no place for political violence anywhere, but why is it so heightened right now? And what is the antidote to bring it down? Because just putting one side against the other, we're just going to always just try to keep outdoing each other, and then violence will keep happening. So I want to go a layer deeper and try and figure out, like, why is this violence surfacing in such a way right now, and how do we get it to stop?
I made $371,000 last year buying used cars. Here's the one easy mistake that'll cost you thousands.